The midnight knock. What happens when the most powerful man in the city shows up at your door at midnight, soaking wet and desperate? What secret drives a billionaire to abandon his luxury penthouse for a tiny cafe that serves coffee for $3 a cup? And why would someone who controls million-dollar deals beg for just one more chance to sit at a scratched wooden table? These questions would torment Emma Chen for weeks to come, but on this rainy October night, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. The rain hammered against the windows of Brewing Dreams Cafe as Emma wiped down the last table, her movements methodical despite her exhaustion. The vintage clock on the brick wall showed 11:47 p.m., its steady tick echoing through the empty space. She had inherited this little corner establishment from her grandmother 3 years ago, and while it barely paid the bills, it felt like home in ways her tiny apartment never could. Emma untied her apron, revealing a simple cream sweater that complemented her dark hair. At 25, she had learned to find joy in small things. The satisfied smile of a customer savoring their first sip, the gentle hiss of the espresso machine, the warm amber glow that made even strangers feel welcome. Tonight felt different, though. A strange restlessness had settled in her chest, as if the universe was holding its breath. She was reaching for the light switch when it happened. Knock, knock, knock. 3 deliberate raps on glass that made her heart skip. Emma froze, hands suspended in midair. Who would come to a cafe at this hour? The neighborhood was quiet, respectable. Even the late-night diner 3 blocks over had closed an hour ago. Through the rain-streaked window, she could make out a tall figure in what looked like an expensive suit. The man stood perfectly still despite the downpour, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. Street light caught the sharp angles of his face, revealing features that belonged in a magazine rather than outside her humble cafe. Emma's mind raced through possibilities. Lost tourist? Someone seeking shelter? Her grandmother had always warned her about opening doors to strangers, but something about his posture suggested vulnerability rather than threat. He wasn't trying to peer inside or rattle the handle. He simply stood there, waiting. She cracked the door open just enough to speak through the gap. "We're closed. I know." His voice was deep, cultured, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "I was hoping for just one cup of coffee. One last cup before the day ends." Emma studied his face more carefully. Exhaustion lined his eyes, the kind that comes not from physical tiredness, but from carrying weight too heavy for one person. She had seen that look before in her own mirror during the first year of running the cafe, when bills piled up and success seemed impossible. "It's nearly midnight," she said, though her grip on the door had loosened slightly. "I know what time it is." He glanced at his expensive watch, then back to her. "Sometimes midnight is when you need coffee most." There was something in his tone that made her pause. Not entitlement or demand, but a quiet desperation that spoke to the part of her that had always been too kind for her own good. Emma had built her cafe on the principle that everyone deserved a warm place to belong, even if only for an hour. "You're going to drip all over my floor," she said, stepping back and opening the door wide. Relief flickered across his features. "Thank you." As he entered, Emma caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with rain and something else. Success, if success had a smell. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months, but it was rumpled now, the perfect lines disturbed by whatever had driven him out into the storm. He chose a table near the window, moving with the careful precision of someone accustomed to being watched. Emma found herself studying him as she prepared the coffee, noting the way he sat with his back straight, despite his obvious fatigue. How his fingers drummed silently against the table in a rhythm that suggested nervous energy barely contained. "Regular coffee, or something specific?" she asked, grateful for the familiar routine of grinding beans and measuring water. "Whatever you recommend for someone who can't sleep anyway." Emma selected her favorite blend, a dark roast with hints of chocolate that her grandmother had perfected over decades. As the machine hummed to life, she stole another glance at her unexpected customer. He was looking around the cafe with genuine interest, taking in the mismatched furniture, the local artwork on exposed brick walls, the bookshelf where customers could leave novels for others to discover. "You did all this yourself?" he asked, gesturing to the cozy interior. My grandmother started it. I just tried not to ruin what she built. Emma poured the coffee into her favorite mug, a hand-thrown ceramic piece made by a local artist. Cream or sugar? Black is fine. She set the mug in front of him, and was surprised when he didn't immediately drink. Instead, he cupped it in both hands, letting the warmth seep into his palms while inhaling the rich aroma. This place has a good feeling, he said after a moment. Peaceful. That was the idea. My grandmother always said a cafe should be like a pause button for life. He looked up at her then, really looked, and Emma felt something shift in the air between them. His eyes were gray, like storm clouds, and for a moment she forgot that he was a stranger who had appeared at her door in the middle of the night. I'm James, he said, extending a hand. Emma. Her fingers brushed his briefly, noting the calluses that seemed at odds with his polished appearance. So, James, what brings you out in weather like this? A shadow passed over his face. Sometimes you need to be somewhere that feels real. Before Emma could ask what he meant, he took his first sip of coffee. His eyes closed briefly, and something in his expression eased. This is exceptional. Secret ingredient is caring about what you're doing. James smiled. Then, the first genuine expression she had seen from him. I can taste it. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the only sounds the pattering rain and the soft jazz that Emma always left playing. She found herself wondering what story he carried, what had driven him from whatever world he belonged to into hers. Do you often rescue strangers at midnight? James asked. Only the ones who look like they need rescuing. And how do I look? Emma considered this seriously. Like someone who's forgotten how to be anywhere but busy. James set down his mug, studying her with newfound interest. You're very perceptive for someone so young. You're very polite for someone who just called me young. This earned her another smile, broader than before. Touche. As the clock struck midnight, Emma realized she had been holding her breath. Something was happening here, something that felt larger than a simple late-night coffee service. The stranger across from her was becoming less strange with each passing moment, and she found herself hoping he wouldn't finish his drink too quickly. So, she said, settling into the chair across from him, tell me about your day that ended with desperate coffee seeking. James looked surprised by the directness of her question, then thoughtful. How much time do you have? All night, if necessary. And as the rain continued to paint patterns on the windows of Brewing Dreams Café, Emma had no idea that her simple act of kindness had just set in motion a story that would change both their lives forever. The most powerful question wasn't what had brought him to her door, but what would happen when morning came and he had to leave. Coffee and confession. What do you do when the stranger who knocked at your door turns out to be someone whose face appears on magazine covers? How do you handle the moment when you realize that your simple act of kindness has created something far more complicated than you ever imagined? And what happens when someone from a world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals begins to crave the simplicity of your small cafe more than anything money can buy? Emma was about to discover that some connections transcend every boundary society tries to build between people. 3 nights had passed since James first appeared at her door, and Emma found herself glancing at the clock more often as midnight approached. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more. But when the familiar knock came at 11:58 p.m., her heart betrayed her with its sudden acceleration. You're 2 minutes early, she said, as she opened the door, trying to keep her tone light. I was worried you might leave before I got here. James stepped inside, shaking droplets from his coat. Tonight, he wore jeans and a simple black sweater, looking more approachable than the polished businessman from their first encounter. Where's the expensive suit? At home. I decided formal wear might be overkill for midnight coffee. He settled into what Emma had begun thinking of as his table. Besides, I had a feeling you preferred the real version. Emma started the coffee without asking what he wanted, already learning his preferences. Dark roast, black, served in the hand-thrown mug he seemed to favor. So what's the real version of James like? Probably disappointing compared to whatever you've imagined. Try me. James watched her work, noting the practiced efficiency of her movements, the way she hummed softly while grinding beans. The real James spends most days in meetings talking about numbers that represent other numbers. He lives in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and eats meals that cost more than most people make in a day. He hasn't cooked for himself in 5 years, and can't remember the last time he had a genuine conversation with someone who didn't want something from him. Emma set the coffee in front of him, then surprised herself by taking the seat across from him. That does sound disappointing. Told you. What about before? Before the meetings and expensive meals and people wanting things? James cradled the mug, letting the warmth spread through his fingers. Before is a long time ago. I used to build things with my hands. Model airplanes, mostly. Spent hours getting every detail perfect. What happened to that version? Life happened. Responsibilities. My father built Morrison Tech from nothing, and when he died, someone had to take over. James stared into his coffee as if it held answers. Somewhere between learning to read profit margins and managing 1,000 employees. I forgot about building things just for the joy of creating them. Emma found herself leaning forward, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. Do you miss it? Building things? I didn't think I did until I sat in here the other night and watched you make coffee. You put the same care into each cup that I used to put into those model planes. Like everyone mattered. Everyone does matter. My grandmother taught me that. Tell me about her. Emma's expression softened. Mai Chen was 4 feet 11 inches of pure determination. She came here from Taiwan with nothing but recipes and dreams. When she opened this place, people said a Chinese woman couldn't succeed in this neighborhood. She proved them wrong by making coffee so good they couldn't resist coming back. She sounds formidable. She was. But also the kindest person I've ever known. She used to say that feeding people wasn't just about filling their stomachs, it was about nourishing their souls. Emma traced patterns on the wooden table. When she got sick, she made me promise to keep this place exactly as it was. Said the world had enough fancy coffee shops, but not enough homes. Is that what this is to you? Home? More than anywhere else. Emma looked around the cafe, seeing it through his eyes. The mismatched furniture, the chips paint on the walls, the photos of regular customers that her grandmother had collected over the years. I know it's not much compared to what you're used to, Emma. James waited until she met his eyes. This place has more soul than every corporate boardroom I've ever sat in combined. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. Why do you keep coming back here? Because for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. The confession hung between them, honest and raw. Emma realized she was holding her breath again, caught between wanting to comfort him and protecting herself from whatever this was becoming. My turn, James said, clearly trying to lighten the mood. Tell me something about Emma that isn't related to coffee or dead grandmothers. That's most of my life right there. Come on. Hobbies? Dreams? Secret talents? Emma considered this, surprised by how long it took her to think of something. I paint. Terribly, but enthusiastically. Watercolors, mostly. Landscapes that look like they were done by a particularly artistic 5-year-old. I'd like to see them sometime. No? You really wouldn't? Try me. There was something in the way he said it that made Emma believe he actually meant it. When was the last time someone had shown genuine interest in her terrible paintings? What about you? Any secret talents hidden beneath all that corporate success? I can tie a cherry stem with my tongue. Emma burst out laughing. That's your hidden talent? Hey, it's harder than it looks. College party trick that apparently sticks with you. Demonstrate. I don't have a cherry. I might have some in the kitchen for the cocktails we don't serve. You serve cocktails? We don't serve cocktails. That's why I said cocktails we don't serve. Emma grinned. But I keep cherries around, just in case someone needs to prove their tongue dexterity. James laughed, the sound rich and genuine. You're dangerous, Emma Chen. Why? Because I keep fruit. Because you make me want to do ridiculous things, like demonstrate party tricks at midnight in your cafe. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks and busied herself with cleaning the already spotless counter. So what's the most ridiculous thing you've done lately? Besides stalking a coffee shop owner 3 nights in a row? That's stalking? What would you call it? Extremely committed caffeine addiction. That your professional diagnosis? I'm not qualified to diagnose anything more serious than whether someone takes cream in their coffee. Emma returned to the table, noting how natural this felt. This back and forth banter, though you do show all the signs of chronic workaholic syndrome, such as expensive clothes that you wear like armor, phone that buzzes constantly, but which you ignore when you're here, the way you hold yourself, like you're always ready for a fight. Emma paused. And the fact that you need to seek out strangers at midnight just to have a real conversation. James was quiet for a long moment. You see too much. Occupational hazard. You learn to read people when your livelihood depends on making them comfortable. And what do you see when you look at me? Emma studied his face, noting the lines around his eyes, the tension he carried in his shoulders, the way his hands never quite relaxed, even when he was sitting still. Someone who's forgotten how to be happy. The honesty of it hit James like a physical blow. He set down his mug with trembling fingers. That's terrifyingly accurate. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to know. Don't apologize. It's refreshing to meet someone who says what they actually think. It's gotten me in trouble before. I bet it has. James smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. So what's the prescription, Dr. Emma? How does someone remember how to be happy? Emma considered this seriously. My grandmother used to say, happiness isn't something you find. It's something you build. One small moment at a time. Like making the perfect cup of coffee. Like making coffee with care. Like staying open past closing time for someone who needs warmth. Like actually tasting what you're drinking instead of just consuming it. James lifted his mug and took a slow, deliberate sip. Better? It's a start. They sat in comfortable silence, the rain having softened to a gentle patter against the windows. Emma found herself studying James's hands as he held his coffee, noting the careful way he treated the handmade mug, as if it were something precious rather than a simple piece of pottery. Emma, he said eventually, his voice unusually hesitant, can I ask you something personal? More personal than diagnosing your happiness deficiency? Are you lonely? The question caught her off guard with its directness. Emma's first instinct was to deflect, to make a joke and change the subject. But something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't asking out of idle curiosity. He was asking because her answer mattered to him. Sometimes, she admitted quietly, running this place is fulfilling, but it can be isolating. Most of my customers are regulars who come and go quickly. I serve their coffee, we exchange pleasantries. And then I'm alone again with the machines and the books. Is that why you let me in that first night? Loneliness? Emma thought about this carefully. Partly, but mostly because you look like you needed what this place could give you. And what's that? A place to exist without performing. James stared at her, something shifting in his expression. How did you know that's what I needed? Because it's what everyone needs. We all have roles we play during the day, masks we wear to get through. But sometimes, you need somewhere you can just be yourself, even if you're not sure who that is anymore. And you think I can figure that out here. I think you're already starting to. As if to prove her point, James relaxed back in his chair, his shoulders losing some of their perpetual tension. You know, I haven't thought about work once since I walked in here tonight. Good. That means the coffee is working. That what this is? Coffee therapy? It's whatever you need it to be. James finished his coffee and reluctantly checked his watch. I should probably let you get some sleep. Probably. But Emma made no move to clear the table or turn off the lights. Same time tomorrow? The question slipped out before James could stop it, revealing more hope than he intended. I'll be here. As he stood to leave, James hesitated by the door. Emma? Yeah? Thank you. For seeing me instead of just serving me. After he left, Emma sat alone in the golden light of her grandmother's cafe, wondering what she was getting herself into. 3 nights of conversation had revealed more about this mysterious man than seemed possible, and yet she felt like she had barely scratched the surface. There were depths to James Morrison that would take months to explore, complexities that both intrigued and frightened her. But as she finally turned off the lights and locked the door, Emma couldn't deny the anticipation already building for tomorrow's midnight encounter. Whatever this was becoming, she wasn't ready for it to end. The last cup. What happens when 2 people from different worlds realize they can't live without their midnight conversations? How do you choose between a love that feels like coming home and the practical realities that threaten to tear you apart? And when everything you thought you knew about someone turns out to be just the surface, what do you do with the truth underneath? Emma was about to learn that the most powerful connections are also the most fragile, and that sometimes the greatest risk is not in loving someone, but in letting them go. It had been 2 weeks since James first knocked on her door, and their midnight meetings had become the rhythm by which Emma measured her days. She found herself rushing through afternoon customers, eager for the quiet hours when the cafe belonged only to them. Their conversations had evolved from careful politeness to something deeper, more intimate than anything she had experienced before. Tonight felt different though. James arrived exactly at midnight, as had become his habit, but his usual easy smile was strained. He wore a suit again, expensive and perfectly pressed, as if he had just come from somewhere important. Rough day? Emma asked as she prepared his coffee, noting the tension in his shoulders. You could say that. James took his usual seat, but didn't relax into it as he normally did. Emma, we need to talk. The word sent a chill down her spine. In her experience, conversations that began with, "We need to talk," never ended well. She set his coffee down with hands that trembled slightly. That sounds ominous. There's something I haven't told you. Something you deserve to know. Emma felt her heart begin to race. Okay. James stared into his coffee as if gathering courage. When I told you my name was James Morrison, I wasn't lying. But I wasn't telling you the whole truth either. I don't understand. Morrison Tech isn't just some company I inherited. It's one of the largest technology firms in the country. We employ over 50,000 people across 6 continents. James finally met her eyes. I'm not just a businessman, Emma. I'm what people would call a billionaire. Emma felt the world tilt slightly. A billionaire? Yes. And you've been coming to my tiny cafe for 2 weeks, drinking coffee that costs $3, pretending to be someone you're not? I wasn't pretending. Everything I've told you about myself is true. I just didn't mention the scope of it. Emma stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. A billionaire? Of course, you are. That explains the expensive suits, the way you carry yourself, the fact that you can afford to wander around at midnight instead of working. Emma, please no, let me process this. She pressed her palms against the counter, trying to steady herself. You're James Morrison, as in Morrison Tech, as in the James Morrison who was on the cover of Forbes last month. You saw that? Mrs. Patterson from down the street left her magazine here. I remember thinking you looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen your face. Emma laughed, but it sounded hollow. God, I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot. I deliberately didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me, not my net worth. But don't you see? That's the problem. Emma turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You get to choose what parts of yourself to reveal. You get to be mysterious midnight stranger when it suits you and billionaire CEO when that's convenient. But I've been myself this entire time. Completely, honestly myself. James stood, taking a step toward her. And that's what I love about you. The words hung in the air between them, charged with more meaning than either was prepared for. Emma felt her breath catch. Love? James ran a hand through his hair, his careful composure finally cracking. Yes, I know it's crazy and impossible, and we've only known each other for 2 weeks. But yes, I love the way you make coffee like it's an art form. I love how you see people, really see them. I love that you made me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just successful. Emma felt tears spill over despite her efforts to contain them. James, I love that you call me out on my nonsense, and make me laugh at myself. I love the way you light up when you talk about your grandmother and how you touch that necklace when you're nervous. James took another step closer. I love that you opened your door to a stranger and somehow gave me back pieces of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Stop. Emma held up a hand, her voice breaking. Just stop. Why? Because it doesn't matter. The words came out raw, painful. Don't you see? It doesn't matter how we feel about each other. You're James Morrison, billionaire CEO, and I'm Emma Chen, who makes coffee for a living. Those aren't roles we can just step out of when we want to play house. Money doesn't have to change anything between us, doesn't it? When photographers start following me around because I'm dating you, When your board of directors questions your judgment because you're involved with someone so far beneath your social status. When I have to smile and nod at charity galas while people whisper about how you're slumming it with the help. James flinched as if she'd slapped him. It wouldn't be like that, wouldn't it? Tell me honestly. Have you introduced me to anyone in your real life? Your friends, your colleagues, your family? The silence stretched long enough to be an answer. That's what I thought. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You compartmentalized me, James. I'm your midnight escape, your break from reality. But I'm not actually part of your real world, am I? That's not fair, isn't it? When you leave here, you go back to your penthouse and your board meetings and your life. When I close this door, this is my life. This cafe, this neighborhood, these people. I can't slip in and out of different versions of myself depending on the time of day. James felt panic rising in his chest. Emma, please? I know I should have told you sooner about the money, but it's not just about the money. Emma's voice was quieter now, exhausted. It's about the fact that you felt you needed to hide it. What else haven't you told me? What other parts of your life are you keeping separate? Nothing. I've told you everything that matters. Have you? What about the woman I saw you with in that newspaper photo? The one the caption identified as your longtime companion. James went very still. How did you? Mrs. Patterson's magazines are very thorough. So who is she? Victoria Ashworth. We've known each other since college. Our families are friends, and she's someone my mother hoped I would marry. Someone from the right background. With the right connections. Emma felt something break inside her chest. Are you engaged to her? No, but everyone expects us to be eventually. Everyone, except you? James was quiet for so long that Emma had her answer before he spoke. I don't know. Before I met you, it seemed like the logical choice. Compatible backgrounds. Similar goals. No complications. No love. I thought love was something people made up to justify poor decisions, and now, James looked at her with such longing that it hurt to witness. Now, what it feels like to miss someone before they've even left the room. Emma closed her eyes, fighting against the part of her that wanted to fall into his arms and pretend the complications didn't exist. James, I can't be your midnight escape anymore. What do you mean? I mean, this has to end. Tonight? No, James crossed the space between them in 2 quick strides. Emma, please? We can figure this out. How? By hiding in coffee shops for the rest of our lives? By pretending that the differences between us don't matter? By being honest about what we want? What do you want, James? Really? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact instant when his walls came down completely. I want to wake up next to you and make you terrible coffee. Because I still haven't figured out your machine. I want to take you to dinner at places that don't require reservations a month in advance. I want to meet your friends and have you meet mine and not worry about whether we fit into each other's worlds because we'll build our own. Emma felt her resolve weakening. And Victoria Ashworth. We'll have to find someone else to fulfill her family's expectations. Your board of directors? Can adapt or find a new CEO. The photographers and the whispers and the people who think I'm not good enough can go to hell. Despite everything, Emma smiled. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we've been overcomplicating it. Emma wanted desperately to believe him, but she had seen too much of the world to think love conquered everything. What if it's not enough? What if trying to bridge our worlds destroys what we have? James reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away fresh tears. Then we'll have tried, and that will be more than most people ever get. You're asking me to risk everything. I'm asking you to risk everything for everything. Emma stared into his eyes, seeing not the polished CEO or the mysterious midnight stranger, but simply the man who had somehow become essential to her happiness in the space of 2 weeks. The man who made her laugh and challenged her assumptions and looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, he agreed. We're from different worlds, so we'll build a bridge. People will say, only with you for your money. People always need something to talk about. Your family will hate me. My family doesn't get a vote in who I love. Emma felt the last of her resistance crumble. If we do this, we do it right. No more secrets, no more hiding parts of ourselves from each other. Agree. And if it gets too complicated, if the pressures become too much, we talk about it instead of running away. Agreed. And you have to learn to make coffee. Real coffee, not the instant stuff you probably have your assistant bring you. James laughed, the sound bright with relief. That might be the most challenging requirement yet. Emma stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. So, James said, resting his forehead against hers. What happens now? Emma looked around her grandmother's cafe, at the mismatched furniture and hand-thrown mugs, at the photos of customers who had become family and the bookshelf full of stories shared by strangers. Now, you help me close up, and tomorrow you come back, not at midnight, but at a reasonable hour, when people can see you're here with me, and then we figure out how to build that bridge. As they worked together to clean the cafe, Emma felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She was stepping into the unknown, risking her heart and possibly her peaceful life for the chance at something extraordinary. But as James carefully washed her grandmother's hand-thrown mugs and asked detailed questions about the coffee-making process, Emma realized that perhaps the most extraordinary thing wasn't that she was falling in love with a billionaire. It was that he was falling in love with the ordinary life she had built with her own hands. When they finally locked the door and stepped out into the cool night air together, Emma felt like she was closing one chapter of her life and opening another. Tomorrow would bring challenges she couldn't imagine and complications she wasn't prepared for. But tonight, walking hand in hand down the empty street with the man who had first knocked on her door looking for just one last cup of coffee, Emma Chen felt like the richest woman in the world. Some stories end with the last cup of coffee, others begin with it. And as James squeezed her hand and promised to be back in the morning to learn the proper way to steam milk, Emma realized that their story was just getting started. After all, the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone worth the risk. Someone who makes you believe that building a bridge between two impossible worlds might just be possible after all. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that someone shows up at your door at midnight, asking for just one last cup of coffee, and changes your life forever.